All right. It's 7:01. I'd like to call the Old Saybrook Board of Education meeting to order. Let's begin with pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, welcome everyone, and good evening. Do we have audience or citizens this evening?
Yes.
Okay, let me just briefly go over, the rules for, the guidelines. So the Board of Education does not respond to specific questions during the course of a public address, although a topic may formally be added to the Board of Education agenda at a later time. All speakers need to identify themselves by their name and address. There'll be 3 minutes, for each speaker to speak. And speakers are required to refrain from presentations that discuss specific employees of the Board of Education, regardless of whether or not the employee is identified in the presentation by name or by another reference. Would you please state your name and address?
Hi, my name is Denise Dobratz and I live at 20 Pepperidge Trail.
Please proceed.
Good evening, board members. My name is Denise Dobratz and this marks my 4th time addressing my ongoing quest for a resolution to the repeated inequities in the cooperative sports policy at Old Saybrook High School. As outlined previously, dating back to August 2022, our family has faced significant financial burden due to the inconsistent application of pay-to-play fees for co-op sports. While our daughter Kendall was charged $2,200 annually to participate in co-op ice hockey team with Daniel Hand High School for 2 years, the Old Saybrook High School football players incurred no costs at all. We also discovered tuition payments made by the Board of Education under Jan Peruccio's guidance for boys ice hockey players who were in a co-op with East Haven High School, further highlighting this disparity. Despite assurances from former Superintendent Peruccio and former BOE President Nichols and Athletic Director Saunders regarding earmarked funds and a new policy, none of this has ever materialized. Communication has ceased and no policy was ever discussed or passed. While we were hopeful after meeting with Superintendent Drezek in July of 2024, who agreed on the need to address this, his subsequent email in September indicated ongoing policy meetings. We're now 9 months later and we've been informed that no such discussions have taken place. Furthermore, Superintendent Drezek now states he cannot communicate with us due to a pending complaint. This leaves us in an even more precarious position because, as I mentioned last time, with the superintendent unable to communicate with us, who will advocate for our son Keegan, who is a sophomore? We had to pay $1,500 for him to play the North Branford High School ice hockey co-op, and there's still no policy. Adding to our frustration, this is our 4th BOE meeting seeking answers. It's been over 2 years since this issue began. There's been absolutely zero communication between me and my family and the board since December of 2023. We now feel that not only was our daughter discriminated against, but now our son has no advocate within the school system. Our pending case with the CHRO involving our daughter Kendall should have no bearing on how our son is being treated. One has nothing to do with the other. Over the last couple of months, Superintendent Drezek and Athletic Director Saunders have continued to refer to the alleged 4-person minimum regarding payment for co-op sports. This policy or document does not exist. We have repeatedly asked for the document. All parties involved have admitted that this actually does not exist. We've also spoken several times to First Selectman Carl Fortuna, who agrees with our position. He has reached out to Jan Peruccio and Superintendent Drezek and urged them to settle this matter to no avail. My question to the board is this. When is this going to stop for our family? When will the board agree to communicate with my family and me to resolve this issue? I have reached out to the head of the Board of Education to no avail via email. As an educator myself, I'm truly appalled and deeply disappointed by the lack of action and communication, cooperation, oversight from this town and the Board of Education. I appreciate the opportunity to speak at these meetings, but I'm not able to have any conversations with any of you, and reaching out to you, I'm not able to speak to anyone. So what I really need and what I'm asking for is a discussion, and I'm certain that we can all agree that that's the next step.
Thank you, Mr. Dobratz.
Can I leave this with you, or this is what I just said?
You can leave that.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. You too. Thank you.
I don't.
We can have someone else.
We do have someone online. If the person online would like to speak, just raise your hand in the button at the bottom of the screen. Otherwise, we'll move on.
Do we have a question or a presentation from the audience online? Okay, thank you. All right, we'll move on the agenda. Reports from the student board, our student board of representatives.
Alright, so this is the student report for month of April and for March as well. So starting with academics, the 2025-2026 election for the new student reps, the current juniors and sophomores is underway. There was the NEMFA performances on March 13th to 15th, which is the New England Music Festival Association. The college career and readiness, they had a supply chain and management virtual job shadow with David Steck, from Hartford University on the 2nd of March. There was also the Harlem on My Mind performance on February 27th. The National Honor Society had a leadership field trip on February 27th in a convention at Trinity College. And the junior Azmin Sekunjan was elected to serve on the statewide executive board for 2025-2026. NHS also had a Blue Shirt LA Wildfire fundraisers, which was a large success, and now they're going to focus on fundraising for prom. The Washington DC trip for juniors and seniors took place on March 20th to the 22nd. The college career readiness also organized a career day at the Middlesex Hospital in Westbrook on the 24th of March. The chamber singers are going to have a trip on April 26th and 27th, where they'll be performing in Yorktown, New York. And they'll be traveling to spend some time in New York City, seeing The Outsiders on Broadway. The class of 2026 had a Paris night out on April 4th. SAT day was on the 26th of March. The blood drive was on March 14th, and there's a total of 28 donors. The intro to entrepreneurship sent out a search for different Rampage or item ideas that they could sell, which include ramp boards, hoodies, and stickers. The Spring Fling Dance is happening for a capstone project in late April. It will be similar to the Latino parties from before, and it's combined with Westbrook. Guidance is currently holding a student and parent college meetings for juniors to discuss their plans for the next year. And the junior and senior prom will be held at St. Clements Castle on May 31st. Moving on to sports. Spring sports officially started on March 24th. Boys lacrosse had a meeting on March 11th, and their first scrimmage was on the 30th of March. Baseball has also started their season of practicing. Crews started their season on the 19th of March, and they're going to have their first regatta on the 12th of April, and they're finally able to co-op with Valley. The crew team also had a car wash fundraiser on the 24th of March, Saturday morning, where it was $10 each for a car wash. Boys baseball had a scrimmage on the 26th of March against NFA. And the softball team also had a scrimmage against Valley on the 31st of March. And their team is very low with only 12 people in it. And finally, tennis season started, and their first match was on April 5th against Cromwell.
Onto clubs. The Drama Club is having a banquet to celebrate their success of the year on May 26th. This will be the first year that we do that. Mean Girls performances by the Drama Club took place March 7th through 9th. It was a really great success with a full house every night and a huge community outpour of support. Youth in Government had their trip to present bills at the Capitol on March 6th through 8th. Some bills and some students were elected, and some bills were risen to a higher elective. DECA, they had a dodgeball tournament on the 14th of March, which was like a fundraising thing for the club. And they also have DECA and some students in financial classes had a field trip to New York City to the stock exchange on the 28th of March. There's a new ping pong club, which meets on Wednesdays and Fridays during Flex. Ecology Club got approved for and is moving ahead with their camping trip in May. Student Government is looking into getting cords for graduation. Rambler will have 2 publications for April, the April Fool's edition, which already was released, and the regular April edition. IPCAA, Intimate Partner Conflict Action and Awareness. They had a bake sale fundraiser in front of Swell on April 6th, which was incredibly successful. They raised over $600, which will be going to a domestic violence shelter in Connecticut. Quiz Bowl lost a match due to the DC trip, leaving too few students to play well. Crisis Text Line is going to the middle school on April, or they went to the middle school on April 4th to discuss mental health care. May 23rd is the Cancer Walk date. And the team that is like running the coordination of it is currently focused on encouraging teams to participate in the walking and the relay races. And they're going to be selling shirts, food, and bracelets. And we also have another new club, Dance Club, which will be run by OSHS senior and competitive dancer Emma Elgar. And then finally, our student opinion section, removal of the Flex Pass system was very much appreciated by students. Many freshmen feel that global citizenship might not be that important of a course, and for that reason, many have decided to take modern world history their freshman year, which typically is like they take global citizenship freshman year. But upperclassmen have discussed that they feel that taking the course was extremely beneficial to them in the long run. The freshmen state that their transition to the high school was very bad, saying that the middle school didn't prepare them for high school. An example of this is that writing is used in many classes in the high school, while they say that the middle school only does writing in English and doesn't prepare them for the rest of high school writing types and techniques. Many people want more connection between high schoolers and middle schoolers to better prepare them for the transition to high school. They personally wish that teachers gave more high school type assignments or practice so they could understand more of what will be expected of them later on. Everyone really enjoyed the DC trip, felt really impacted by the experience. Thank you, Ms. Payne. Some said that the SAT test rooms were very distracting with different teachers moving around and some students being very distracting. The rooms were very crowded with too many kids. So students really want more rooms in the future for testing and really a designated wing for testing so that distractions are limited. And finally, many boys still feel very uncomfortable about the setup of the bathroom, complaining that the urinals are too close together and some are visible from the hallway. And that's all we have to do.
Questions from the board?
Fabulous report. First, I would just thank you for mentioning that the student representatives are kind of on their way. And I know one of the requirements is to attend a board meeting, so maybe when they come to a board meeting, they could say they're here because they're
We have
interested.
a couple tonight, actually.
Oh. Good. And also thank you for explaining the acronyms,
Mhm.
which is really helpful in college research.
Thank you so much. Okay, we'll move on to, if there's any correspondence.
None this evening.
Then our next action is the approval of the regular meeting minutes from March 25th. Moved by Alan, seconded by Jane. Any discussion? Then all approved or all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you. Motion carries. Then we'll move on to our student representative survey.
This actually came from both of us. Per board policy. You two are gonna get a survey tonight.
Yeah.
With a homework date for the 23rd, share with the board your experience. So tonight you formally get the survey, and then you have an obligation to make sure you give it back to us no later than the 23rd, so that we can share with the entire board at the following meeting on the 27th. So you guys are not shy, so we can't wait to see your response.
Chris, you say something that's electronically.
Yes.
Nice. Yeah,
They should have
okay.
that.
Great.
All right, next is our Washington DC presentation.
Hi, I'm Caroline, and tonight I'm just talking a little bit about our experience in DC and why I think it's so important that we keep going on this trip. So March, I believe 21st to the 23rd, juniors and seniors were given the opportunity to go to DC for 2 nights and 3 days. It's about a 6-hour bus trip there and back. We took these nice coach buses and we had really 2.5 days that were jam-packed, filled with like fun experiences and also really great learning opportunities and also just like life experiences. Some of the highlights for this trip from me and from some of my peers that I've heard from were the African American History Museum, the Holocaust Museum, and then the cruise we went on. The African American History Museum was a huge museum that it was about 4 stories, and it was just a really great opportunity because it starts in the base floor at the Middle Passage, and it goes all the way up to the creation of Black Lives Matter and recent protests. And it was just really interesting because not only does it build understanding for students, but it also gives them history. One of the main purposes of going to DC. And then another highlight was, I believe the next night we went on a really fun cruise, which wasn't educational at all, but it was just a really great bonding opportunity. It was very pretty. We were on the water for about 2 hours. We got food, we got to dance, and that was like a nice break. So that was a really great opportunity. But then one of the most impactful parts was the Holocaust Museum. And this was great for a number of reasons. But I think it really just like highlights one of the main purposes of going on the trip, which is that having those experiences and going to those museums and leaving Old Saybrook is just an opportunity for our students to build their empathetic skills and feel empathy and also understand others' life experiences. We also definitely experienced that at like the 9/11 not museum, memorials that we went to. And I think that just being in DC and understanding and feeling like you're in the center of where decisions are being made is just really impactful for students. And I think that was a really great opportunity for students to broaden their perspectives and just beyond where we are like every day. Thanks,
Probably, I actually asked for volunteers and Caroline raised her hand at super and said, I'll come tell the board about what DC was. So that's why she's here. I mean, she jumped right in front of, like, I'm not surprised before I got a chance to even introduce you, so. I'll shut up.
Yeah, no, Caroline, that was an outstanding presentation. Congratulations, you're a wonderful public speaker. And thank you for sharing the student perspective. It was nice to hear from you. And although we did, Mrs. Payne, you're always wonderful, but it was terrific having, the student participation. So well done. You gave a terrific overview of that trip and the value to all of you. So thank you.
Sounds like a great opportunity to get down to the nation's capital. Do you have any time to explore different memorials and monuments, like the Washington Monument, for example?
Yeah,
When you were down there?
we hit a lot of monuments. I might not remember all of them, but we definitely went to the Jefferson Memorial, the Lincoln Memorial, Vietnam, Korean memorials, World War I and World War II memorials, Abraham Lincoln Memorial, and possibly a couple other that I'm forgetting. We also went to, I don't know if it's the Air Force Memorial, I'm not sure if it's been, but it was like a structure that was dedicated to the Air Force as well. And I'm sure a bunch more that I'm forgetting. We did a lot.
Thank you.
Arlington's National Cemetery.
Do you happen to know what participation was in terms of juniors and seniors? How many attended?
Overall, we had about 100 students go on the trip. I'm not sure the composition of juniors and seniors, but it seemed fairly split to me, but I'm not sure. I'm sure Ms. Payne could answer that.
Are there any suggestions for next year on trying to increase that number, just in terms of participation of students?
Yeah, I mean, I think that interest was certainly there from students. I think that, there is definitely a significant economic barrier to going. I'm not sure the scholarship opportunities that were provided, but the trip, costs money because you're paying for the bus and security, hotel, and also a lot of the opportunities. So I'm sure like any way that we can further aid students to like economically to help them go on this trip, then that would definitely increase participation.
Great, thanks.
Just one question, in previous years, this was a junior class trip. And I think since, I don't know if it was a post-COVID thing, but, the last couple of trips have been juniors and seniors and it's every 2 years, which seems a pretty efficient and cost-effective way of doing that. Do you see any pros or cons? The fact that it's juniors and seniors, did that go really well? Or do you think it'd be more impactful if it was just juniors?
Yeah, so I think that I thought about that a little bit before we went, but it was honestly fairly, so there was like a junior bus and a senior bus, and we kind of layered our activities so that for every activity, we weren't all together in one big room. We had 2 tour guides separately that guided us through the trip. So I thought that it was really great that that we were juniors and seniors, because again, it definitely is more efficient. And also it's definitely a break for the teachers so that they don't have to do that trip every year. And I didn't really notice or hear of any cons because we had time together when we were on the boat, but we also had a lot of our days apart. And then the other times you could really choose who you wanted to be with. So I didn't really hear any complaints about that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn, for your presentation. It was excellent. I would just like the board to consider at a later time, budgeting for the trip so that all the kids that want to go can go. I don't know if anyone was excluded at this point, but to your point, it is expensive. So, at a later time, we have the board to reconsider. We did discuss it briefly this year. Budgeting for this, so that every student who wanted to go could. Thank you.
Any, again, wonderful presentation. Any thoughts about how you might change or staff member might rearrange that travel?
I'm really appreciative to how Miss Payne did this trip. It was like a very good mixture of like fun and, learning. I think that the big thing that I heard from students is that, they felt like they didn't have quite enough time at the museums, but I don't know if there's really any way to address that because of course there's some students who feel like they don't have enough time. There's some students who feel like 2 hours is plenty of time. So I think that that's a nice balance. And also I think we just need to remind students that like, you don't have to just go to these museums once. You can go to them, dive into the things that you want to dive into and within those 2 hours and then just promise yourself that you're gonna come back and finish. So I don't have a ton of suggestions about how we would rearrange it. I think it was really well put together.
Thanks.
And Ms. Payne, I know you're on as well too. I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to add or any viewpoint from your end.
Well, Caroline, next time I present, I feel like you should come with me. Feel free to come back. Thank you for all that you've done to come and present and your availability. So I just want to say that we did offer it every 2 years. I am looking at 2026 for the next year. And that's because it will be the 250th anniversary. So I know it's a little bit sooner and I'm still going to need approval. But the reason that I am looking is because 2026 will be an impactful year for the learning and for Washington, D.C. They're basically going to have a lot of acknowledgement of the 250th year of our nation. So that's why I'm looking into it. I am also looking to host a Harlem Wizards game. I actually just confirmed the date today, November 24th. So that will also help with the fundraising. That was very beneficial for 4 years ago when we went, 2 years ago when we went, whenever we went prior. And I think that was an opportunity that helps a lot of the students who can't financially support it. And I do agree that I wanted to be able to offer a third bus. It's just because of our numbers dwindling, the third bus, we have to pay for every seat that's not filled. And last time we went with a third bus, we had to pay a lot of money, which is where a lot of the prior funds had gone to. They weren't necessarily going to students going, they were going to the lack of students going. And again, that's not because of lack of interest, it's really because of just our smaller numbers. So I would have loved to offer a third bus, but based off our numbers for the interest survey, I always had fewer than 100 actually sign up. So we did only take 100. It was about, I would say like 55, 45. For seniors, there were a few more seniors than juniors that went. But overall, it was a pretty even split. There were 50 on each bus, and the buses were very full, which I know the students didn't enjoy, but we were trying to make the most of the buses that we had and the space that we had. But again, if we had a third bus, I only had about 6 kids on the wait list. So we would have been paying for a lot of those empty seats. I think that's it.
Yeah, Karen.
I wonder, you know, think about the 6 kids that couldn't get on the bus. I wonder if this would be an opportunity to perhaps coordinate with Westbrook. Their numbers are so small. And perhaps that might be an opportunity to fill a third bus with those students. I don't know.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. I could reach out to their department head.
Here's the thought.
Thank you.
Well done. It's always
Yeah.
so fun to hear about these presentations and particularly to hear about it for the student one. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Caroline.
I volunteered before I had a chance to ask Megan if she. That's why she's on the screen. So I apologize in public that she was eager before I had a chance to ask him.
Just a question, so I don't know, I may have this confidentiality, but for those students that weren't able to go on that trip, when you plan it again, is that something that you can circle back to them? And see that they can be included?
In 2026, in the fall of 2026, they will have graduated. So yeah, so we'll be taking, it will be the current sophomores and freshmen who will be seniors and juniors.
That was a bus issue, that wasn't about affordability.
Nope, we were actually able to support financially about 8 students who requested financial assistance. And for a few of them, we were able to pay, actually for the majority of them, we paid about half the trip.
The Educational Foundation is a reach as well.
Yes, thankfully we had, this time around, we had some leftover finances from the Harlem Wizards. We just didn't have a ton, but we did have enough to supply for the students that needed it. But we will need to dip into our funds next time, which is why we're holding another Harlem Wizards game. So if anybody's interested in playing.
Thank you so much.
I'm looking at Mr. Wall.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, so we'll move on to our climate presentation next.
Thank you. So tonight we welcome Bachman, Dr. Bachman, Mr. Wall. I know Mr. Suppin was able to attend tonight, so some people are gonna take a little extra duty, but I'm gonna probably turn it over to Dr. Bachman, because I'm guessing she's gonna start.
I am. Thank you, everybody. Our climate presentation this evening is really focused on climate goals and action steps that occurred this school year based on data collected at the end of the school year last year. Let me bring that up. All right, as always, we want to make sure that the work we're doing is connected to our strategic plan. This one's, I think, very well connected in the sense that obviously we want students to feel respected. We want them to come to school and feel happy and proud of who they are. So having a climate where students are respectful and caring of each other is extremely important. We want opportunities for students to be able to learn, which means that we have to make sure that we have a very safe environment for them, that they feel supported, and that they have the skills to be able to be successful socially and emotionally today, but also into their futures. I'm going to turn it over to Dave for the high school piece. Sorry.
Actually, a perfect segue. Good evening, everybody. I'm here with Mrs. Courtwright, Amy Courtwright, who is a special education teacher at Old Seabrook High School. She is also serves on our Safe School Climate Committee at the high school, and she's also married at the high school.
Senior and junior.
So she wears all the hats for us. Dr. Bachman was mentioning the idea of teaching students the social skills so that when they graduate for us, or when they graduate the high school, they're ready to go out and navigate the world. So our goal this year definitely had that in mind. And our goal is to empower students to manage peer conflict rather than solely relying on adults or heavily relying on adults to do that for them. And there were some specific things that we saw going on that led us to develop this goal as a Safe School Climate Committee. I'm going to let Mrs. Courtwright speak about the rationale behind it.
So if we jump down to the bottom there, the question on our survey that had the highest negative response was, in the school, students have lots of chances to help decide things like class activities in school. And so that was kind of our focus for this, for the rationale. So the 3 bullet points there spell out why we chose this. That's it. One more little bit longer.
There we go, sorry.
So our current safety plan that we have in place now is more of a teacher, adult directed, plan for students that we provide to them. So our new focus is going to be to help them formulate, the conflict resolution.
So the plan, the action steps, I should say, that we developed, once we saw the information in front of us and we were thinking about what's the best way to go about. Of giving students the ability to manage those conflicts. Whether it's with a peer or within the classroom with the teacher, if there's a disagreement. And so we realized, that we needed to start with sort of a reset at the beginning of the school year to redefine, take a moment and say. In the classroom, when behaviors occur, what are the expectations around the building in terms of handling this? What is the appropriate response for a teacher? When does it go to the administration? And we just had a conversation and laid that out at the very beginning of the school year. So everybody had that shared mindset of what those expectations were. In the meantime, our school climate committee, realizing that we were managing so many different safety plans, which are important. But we realized we needed another tool in the toolbox, that we were relying solely on that. So we said, let's take some time and research what are some different strategies and resources that we could adopt as a school that would help our students manage conflict, but also learn how to do that together or on their own, so that they weren't just relying on the adults to provide the solutions for them. So that process is pretty much still ongoing. We're looking at a variety of different methodologies to that. We're collecting some student input and their ideas about those different resources and opportunities. And we've already got some future things in mind on how we'll go about doing this, which will include using our advisory programming to do that. And I'll speak more about this when we get into the successes later on in the presentation. But I think we took this time to really come up with some good solid programming, took our time to research what would be best and have a good idea of where we're going with this next.
Thank you, Mr. Blacken and Mrs. Courtwright. So at the middle school, our focus this year and our goal was to ingrain and sustain a positive learning culture through compassion, empathy, and mutual respect. And if you look at those words at the bottom, there's a common kind of theme and focus across the last 3 years, and that's been on inclusivity, belonging, and specifically this year on kindness, which has been a lot of our advisory and our lessons have kind of mean to. Our rationale. So when we looked at the survey and we looked at those focus groups of our students, our staff, our parent guardian groups, 3 questions jumped out at us. And that first question, number 3, was really around students respecting one another and being treated with respect. And that ranged from 58% in grade 7, all the way up to a high of 88 with our faculty. On question number 19, on focus, where we're looking at the feelings and understanding of feelings of others, a little bit higher overall. And interestingly enough, again, in our faculty area, the people that are working with our students the most are stating that they feel like these things are being done really well in our building. So a little discrepancy there and something for us to dig at a little bit more and try to figure out why that's happening. And the last question number 21, was around being an upstander and really intervening when students might be showcasing mean behaviors towards one another. That's a really difficult skill to do at any age, specifically in middle school. So, you know, I was expecting some of those numbers might be a little bit lower, but there was a range there from 68 to 85% with our youngest group, 85 in 5th grade. So what are we doing at the middle school? Our action steps to kind of address some of those things and look at kindness. That first bullet up there is really focused on the feedback that we got and our shared experiences that we have across the building. We're lucky that we have a really robust Safe School Climate Committee, and we have a huge student voice, and the students really lead kind of the work that gets done. So a lot of the things that they're saying that they're needing and what's developmentally appropriate, quite frankly, is what's happening out of those meetings. So really listen to them and drive a lot of our discussion around what they're saying that they need from us. The second bullet's about our advisory. Again, really focused on kindness and showing like what does kindness look like? How can we be kind to one another? and giving kids the verbiage and the language and the understanding around that. We have a kindness club. You know, they go around doing acts of kindness literally all the time. There's stuff that shows up in our office. And just makes you feel good about, you know, the community and the people around you. And they actually went out and petitioned for our school being looked at as a national school of kindness, and they won that designation last year, so something that we're really proud about. Our leadership group, our 8th grade students, they are out there, very active, having a huge presence in our school, doing a lot of work, running activities on their own, coming up with ideas, reflecting on their own behavior, how we can become better to one another. And then they're going out and role modeling and working with the younger students in our younger grades. So really proud of the work that our students do for us in our building. Working off our support staff, they're doing a lot of small group work and really looking at the relationships that everybody has, but specifically with our increase in multi-language learners, making sure that that's a population of students that is certainly part of our school culture and has every opportunity to be engaged. And to have relationships with everybody. So a lot of work happening there. And of course, our restorative practices, something that we've been really working hard with over the years, focused on the empathy and skill development, and looking at restoring relationships. So when there's issues with a staff member or even you know, a peer, how do we fix that and how do we show each other that our actions have impact to others? So that's what's happening at the middle school. Dr. Blockman.
All right, so for Goodwin School, I am stepping in for Heston, so I'm going to do the best I can to answer any questions, and I gathered some feedback as well from some of the staff in the building. So if you have any questions regarding some of these pieces, I may have to get back to you with answers. I'll do the best that I can. So in speaking with the Goodwin staff, they are focusing on,
Sorry.
I'm just messing with me. The Goodwin staff is focusing on assisting students in understanding the natural consequences for their actions. So how do their actions cause impact to others around them? So what they found was on their reflection forms, which is a form students fill out when they make a mistake or that they have a concerning behavior in class, they have to describe and talk about how that behavior influences others, how it may have made others feel, and how it may have made a response in another student or a group of students. And looking at the data from those reflection forms, what they found is that many of the students really had a hard time seeing how their actions impacted others. So about 60% of the students often couldn't understand how their actions occurred. They would blame it on other folks, on other students, on other situations. Students were asked what they could have done differently. About 40% really had a hard time being able to find a different way to explain what it is. Sorry, they couldn't reflect on the process, so they couldn't really identify what it was that they could have done instead of the action that they had taken. And finally, in asking them what they could do to fix the situation, 70% said apologize, but there's some other pieces there, and that's not always going to be the thing that solves all of the issues, and they're hoping to be able to find ways to support the students in identifying other ways to repair damages done when they have a negative behavior. So action steps around this really focus on aligning their practices in the school and the logical consequences that could be happening, along with the restorative classroom model, which is something that they've been implementing over the last couple of years. They're trying to teach the positive consequences that occur when students make good decisions. So not just realizing that there's negative consequences that occur for poor decisions, but also positive things that can happen when you make positive choices. They're building in some teaching within the morning meetings, as well as these monthly themed lessons that happen building wide. And these are focused on particular concerns that the teachers are finding in the classrooms, particular instance of behavior that come up on a more repeated basis, so they can address it in real time, either through the morning meetings, which happens in the individual classrooms, or the monthly themed lessons that will occur in each classroom, but more of a organized structure across the building. And finally, they're trying to implement some opportunities for students to be able to regulate their own emotions through a quiet corner. And they're hoping that students will be able to start to manage that for themselves and be able to identify when they need to take a break and sit on the side maybe for a couple minutes in a quiet space that was designed for each classroom. However, we know that students also need some time to be able to develop that self-regulation and be able to realize when they need to be self-regulated. So this is also an opportunity for teachers to help direct them and help teach them what it is that they might need that regulation. Okay, so through all 3 schools, there's been a lot of successes this year. Obviously, our school year is not over yet, but we wanted to highlight some of the successes from the year based on the action steps that have occurred so far. Dave?
Sure. So at the high school, probably the most immediate and measurable effect has been when we look at the number of office referrals for behavior that are sent to the office. It's been the lowest number of referrals since the 2021 school year when we look at that data, and a lot of factors go into that. But I think one of the things that we can point to is that original reset and conversation with the staff about behavior expectations. And so what doesn't happen anymore so much is you don't get a different reaction for different behaviors in different classrooms as they go around the building. Teachers are all on the same page with that, and I think that helps students to navigate around and act accordingly and to act as we expect them to. The new strategies and resources that we are excited about, that we've researched and have talked to students about, things like peer mediation. So getting students trained and involved in helping each other to manage conflict and working and speaking together in difficult conversations and situations to try to resolve it together. Restorative practices, continuing to build our capacity to be able to rely on those strategies as well. And one of the things we've learned about restorative practices is the cornerstone of that is building the relationships prior to getting to the point where you need to restore them, because if you don't have the relationship to begin with, there's nothing to restore. So we've looked at a variety of different ways through our advisory programming next year to build relationships between students, and especially students who don't necessarily see each other on a daily basis or are in classes together, but really extending that circle of community with all of our students. And so we've identified some things that we need to get trained on, which will include, for me personally, too, a refresher on restorative practices, safe school climate, which I'll be doing with CAS over the summer. And then we have staff members that are excited to be sort of the train the trainer model with restorative practices and peer mediation models. And for middle school.
Thank you, Dave. In middle school, basically infusing kindness everywhere that we can. It's cool to be kind at OSMS is the motto. And, you know, it starts at the morning news. There's usually a tribute to someone being kind or someone being shown up on the morning news for doing an act of kindness. So we're really celebrating those types of things that happen within our building. It happens in our classrooms with our teachers, and it's posted on posters all over the building. If you've been there and check that out. Like Dave said, at the high school, the same sorts of data trends are happening at the middle school. So the past 3 years, you see at the same point, that's an endpoint end of March. Those numbers reflect 183 a couple of years back. We're at 133, down 50 in just 2 years. So that is a nice trend to be looking at. And then lastly, the committee itself is doing a lot of work around the actual survey itself. They've noticed over time that several of the questions have become a bit problematic in the way that we're getting some of the data back. So we're digging into how are the questions being worded? Do the students really understand what's being asked of them? Because we're really not trying to, in that moment, influence a decision or how they're responding to a question. So our ability to clarify is often limited. And there's also been an answer unsure, right? That's been an option on the survey. And we're trying to see if we can come down to a more scaled opportunity where students are more apt to actually pick a response rather than pick something where unsure doesn't give us much data, right? That could kind of go either way. So we were trying to look at, you know, from the student's mind, how are they interpreting the question? How are we able to, as a committee, to really interpret that data to make it specific enough and actionable? So that's where a lot of the work has gone this year.
And for Goodwin School, they've seen an increased participation in wording meeting with students actively being engaged in that process and more peer-to-peer problem solving so that they're learning how to manage some of these pieces early on. And they're also looking to continue their growth as a staff. They're looking to host the regional responsive classroom training in the summer coming up this year, and hopefully attending the first 6 weeks responsive classroom training this summer as well, so that they can continue to build their skills in helping the students develop that social and emotional regulation. And I think overall, what you'll notice across the school district is that each school is really focused on helping students develop the skills that they need to treat each other with kindness and resolve some of these conflicts that are going to come up, not just in school, but as they go off into life. And it starts at an early age with the responsive classroom trainings that they're doing and building on that each year through the middle school with some of the restorative practices, as well as some of that in the high school and even beyond that, and helping develop those relationships ahead of time. So I think if you look at the presentation, you can see how aligned the buildings are and that they're making growth towards supporting students and really owning that process.
A couple of questions. First, Dave, for you. The climate goal is to manage peer conflict, but the rationale identifies conflicts between students and adults in both. Of the first two bullets, again, conflict between teachers and students. Is there a reason? Can you explain that? And is there a history of an excessive level of conflict between teachers and students?
Never between. No, it's not excessive. What we think we saw happening is a student would be in one particular class with a set of expectations. And then when they go to a different class, those expectations might vary slightly, and so that causes the student to question, not necessarily berate the teacher or anything like that, but just, well, I came from here, how come I could do that there, but I'm here and I have to do things a little bit differently. So it wasn't necessarily a conflict, and maybe that's the wrong term to use, but just a misunderstanding of what the expectations are as they go throughout the school. In the rationale, when we talk about conflict and empowering students to manage conflict, the focus is on the peer conflict. But what we recognize what's happening is that the skill set for the students and the teachers, we just wanted to beef up to make sure that we were kind of considering that angle from both, that the teacher to student relationship was solid, and that the student to student relationships were solid too. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, it's just because at one point it's peer to peer and the next it's peer to student. So I'm just curious because they're two kind of different skill sets.
Yep.
Well, they are two different skill sets.
Sure.
Krista, real quick for you, the rationale of the middle school had 7th grade at 58% for other students in the school treat me respectfully. That seems very low. Was that addressed in any way?
Well, so the 7th graders are now this year's 8th graders. And one of the things that we recognized just a couple of years ago was the fact that we were concerned about, particularly when kids get to 8th grade, that sometimes the conflict increases, which research shows 7th and 8th grade, there's always an uptick in those kinds of behaviors. So we, in the last couple of years, put in place a leadership group, which is run by Mark Carroll. I've talked about it here several times. And the idea behind that group is really to set a very high standard for what our expectations are. They get to be involved in a lot of things, but we're teaching them those discrete leadership skills. And they have to meet those expectations to remain as part of the group, but they're taught them throughout. So now the students that are looked at as the leaders are students who are making positive decisions. And I can think, just going through and thinking about the kids that are in that group, some of them have really stood up to be positive leaders now through that process. One in particular was a student who I'd say I met with multiple times over the years, and now in 8th grade, just recently reported a situation in the bathroom. He wasn't a part of it. He reported it to an adult. So instead of being a part of the problem, as he may have chosen to be in the past, he chose to be part of the solution. And that's really the goal of the leadership group. And that is currently occurring in 8th grade, and we use that regularly now. And that would be the group that said that they had the lower numbers.
Thanks. So I don't want to take all the time, but is there any way that this information data can be compared to the Old Civic Youth Friendly Services data? Compare and contrast in any way, or does the district have any intention?
Don't know how detailed.
I don't know if it's apples to apples.
Right, it might not be necessarily. In the last, both the high school and middle school identified reduced office referrals as kind of a success statement. Not every office referral is a peer-to-peer conflict necessarily. It might be a peer-to-teacher. Was there data on student complaints of peer-to-peer conflicts. Whether it be student bringing together, oh, well, I felt harassed or whatever.
Our referral data through the Swiss program for the middle school and the high school does capture what the reason was for the referral to be made. I did not bring that with me this evening, but we do break it down in that sense. And I would say most of the referrals that we have this year, just if I'm remembering correctly, for the middle school are not related to mean behavior, more, maybe not following certain.
Same is true for the high school. We have that data. I don't have it with me, but I would speculate it's probably reflecting the same thing.
Thanks, sir. Take it.
Great, thanks. Great questions. Thank you for a very good presentation for each of you. My questions were similar to what Jack asked, and that was, it was hard for me to make the connection between the question at the high school and the rationale and corrective actions. I think you have explained it a little bit in that the driver for, like, the interpretation of that question was a little challenging for me to connect to the peer-to-peer conflict resolution.
Sure.
But it's, so what I'm hearing you say is that there was conflict between what the students expected themselves to be able to have agency over between classes.
I think, thinking back to the conversation we've had and what we saw in that question, particularly the ending of it, where it said students have lots of chances to help decide things like rules and class activities. So 38% or 32% rather disagreed with that. So we recognize that there's probably, as the years go on and you establish your classroom norms, we forget to include students in those conversations sometimes. And so students don't feel that connection to what the expectations are for them. So we recognize that, when we are establishing relationships with students as teachers, that we need to be inclusive in that process to reduce conflicts later on. So that, wait, you remember those rules we developed together? That's what we expect you to be doing. Yeah, sorry.
Okay. And then thank you to the middle school for including the data. I know that you have made a lot of really good presentations on the Leadership Council and have cited a decline in the referrals to the office. But the results here for question 3 especially are low. And having gotten recognized as a kindness school and having these low survey responses for students feeling that they're respected, are there different actions that you're implementing? Because it feels like we've done this for a few years, we've gotten recognized for the actions that we've taken. And yet there's a significant percentage of students who are feeling that they're not.
Well, I would say that that's probably a couple fold of the other action steps that Matt chatted about. We have the advisory groups, which are targeted to that. So those are specific lessons that are being taught. We have our restorative practices, which is something that they go through and they sit together and they learn from each other, like how did their actions affect each other. So it's kind of an extension of that referral or the reflection process that happens at Goodwin, some of those same questions, but they have to talk with each other about it so that they can hear from the other side. And in addition to that, when we have students through our consult process, which is the process we use to identify students when they're making, where they may be struggling with a variety of things. They may be struggling academically, but social, emotionally too. Because oftentimes when we're seeing students who are being unkind to each other, it's because they're trying to deal with some of their own things.
Yeah.
So we, through our consult process, will identify students that may need additional supports. And we put those in place. That could be a variety of things. It could be one-on-one support from our counseling staff. It could be one-on-one support from youth and family counseling staff. It could be groups that we're running, whether it's specifically around social emotional skills, or if it might be more about building friendships. It might be about how to navigate some of those social pieces. So there's a lot of layers to this in place. And I would say in general, I know that this is what students are reporting feeling, but I think it's coming from a small group that we have identified through our consult process that we target based on what their needs are. And it's very individualized to those particular students.
Okay, and then just one question about the restorative practices, is that, do you teach that to all students? Or is it is it to those students who've experienced an issue?
That actual practice, what we do at the middle school is there's pieces of that are kind of spread through the advisory process.
Yeah.
However, when we have conflict between students, that's when we bring them in and we walk them through that process because it does require to actually have the restorative meetings. We're trained to be able to run those meetings.
Yeah, I'm just wondering from the perspective, and I think you had mentioned this, like to maybe build those skills in advance of having
Yes.
conflict, like how do you have difficult
Yes,
conversations?
and that happens through our advisory
Good,
program.
okay, great,
Yep.
thank you.
So Dave, you touched upon, the sort of differences of classroom management perhaps that causes issues, conflicts. So how does administration then, and this would be for really all three schools, how does administration ensure that disciplinary practices, if you will, is fair, consistent, equitable for all students?
So I think
Because I was just gonna add, because we are getting feedback from parents that this continues to be a concern, that it's not consistent from classroom to classroom.
So at the beginning of the year, we started with a presentation to our faculty before school started, where there was a chart that listed some common behaviors that come up that reflects the behaviors on our referral forms that teachers would use to make an office referral. And we put them into tiers. So a tier 1 behavior would be something that should be handled by the classroom teacher. And so now everybody understands that when they see the examples in that tier, that's something that's a conversation with the teacher. And we talk about within that tier, that first tier, what are the strategies that the teachers have and what are the tools that they can use to address the behavior. And then from there, the second tier would be a different set of strategies where maybe there's a partnership with the administration because it's a more serious or repeated behavior that's occurring and the behavior hasn't changed. And then we go to our third tier, which is, something serious is happening, so we need assistance. So building the understanding across the building that the expectation from the administration is there are certain things that are best handled by the classroom teacher. And here are the tools to do that. And we're gonna keep expanding on that with things like the restorative practices that we're gonna keep building our capacity to do. And then there are times when partnering with administration is appropriate. And then there are times when it's only administration that should be, and then you're on the phone or coming to talk to us right away.
In the other buildings, I know not having Mr. Sevelier is problematic.
Yeah, why don't you start?
So at the middle school, and maybe you know this, but we start the year really kind of building the foundation, right? And what we do is we look at the relationship. So that starts with the teacher and the students doing various activities. So it's not like we're opening the book on day one and we're getting into lessons. We're saying like, we value the fact that relationship building and understanding one another, and then going through the building and actually walking students through every single space that they're going to encounter. And we have writing all over the building about being safe, being respectful, being responsible, and then what that looks like in every single location, so that, we spend a good 5 days at the beginning of the year calibrating that across the entire building, whether you're in 5th grade or 8th grade, the expectations are the same, the rules are the same, and we really reinforce that throughout the year. We actually even do a mid-year where we go back and redo all the rules, just in case anyone gets a little loose, sometimes coming back off the holiday, that does happen. So we recalibrate, we make sure we're all kind of like understanding the expectation, working together, having conversations at faculty meetings. We share the Swiss data at all the faculty meetings, making sure staff is aware of like where the heightened areas are, where the heightened times are. Primarily, those are on the unstructured times and they're around recess and lunch. So we have extra staff available. But we spend a lot of time like going over the data and making sure that we're really calibrated in how we have conversations, what the expectations are, and that we're all on the same page with that.
So staff understands this is how we're handling.
We start the year with that, and even before school starts, we do one of our PD sessions is we go back and we look at what are the expectations. They're sent home to families as well, the agreed upon school-wide expectations, and then we even identify some things like what are some of the issues that we had at the end of the school year or throughout the last year that became up. So for example, one of the things was the earbuds in the ears and there was an inconsistent message, or the cell phones being an inconsistent message. This is what we're all agreeing to. And we have that conversation, and we include not just the teachers in that conversation, but the paraprofessionals, because they're often the ones in the less structured places who might see some of those behaviors, and we want to empower them to be able to address those as well. So we're all on the same page.
Great, thank you. So just one more quick one. So Goodwin, we're still doing responsive classroom, and then we jump to both high school and middle school, you're doing restorative.
Right. We use a kind of a combination of positive behavior support, intervention support, PBIS, and the restorative practices. So it's kind of a combination of both. My understanding, and I would have to, I don't know if Chris knows, or we'd have to go back and ask Heston. I don't have as much experience with responsive classroom, but my understanding is that there's like a shared understanding of what the expectations are, which is similar in PBIS, is teaching the expectations directly and then helping students with tiered supports if they are not able to meet those expectations.
Transition. I think they're kind of expanding your original question was, first amendment, this having that clear expectations with staff members, the kids are, and then David mentioned at the beginning of the year, kind of getting everybody to just reset and say, there's also an opportunity district-wide, right? We've had a lot of conversations in this room throughout the year with taking advantage of some new faces in the room to say, okay, do we all, what is our normal expectations in each of our places, and what are some of the successes that you may be having that maybe we can share in a different building and vice versa. So that process is kind of district-wide ongoing as we speak, and you guys can tell them about all the things you tell me behind closed doors. I'm kidding. But those are some of the conversations that we've been having as a district leadership team of how do we create more, because don't forget, we're talking about, just in one of the questions Krista mentioned, like that was last year's 7th grade, it's this year's 8th grade.
Right.
We also have new staff. You may have new staff coming to the district that has a different level of expectations from wherever they came from. They may be brand new to the profession. So making sure that we're calibrating everyone on the same page, and that's something that's ongoing now.
Just one more hopefully quick one. Other than referrals to the office, what other data can you use to assess how effective restorative practices and responsible classroom, how effective?
We do focus groups with kids, and we talk to them directly about how they're feeling, how they feel like they're being respected, if there's kindness amongst their grade level. So that's something that we do. In addition to that, we also can see when we do a restorative meeting, we end our restorative meetings with some kind of an agreement, like this is what everybody said, and I jot that down. I always keep it, and I actually have the kids sign it. That's, I don't think part of restorative practice, but I like them to know, like, it makes it feel official when they sign it, and I sign it too. Mr. Walton signs it. And do we need to go back to that, or does it actually help resolve the issue? And I would say in most cases, it resolves the issue, and sometimes it doesn't, but it typically ends up being the same handful of kids where the issue isn't resolved through that process, which again means that we have some additional tiered supports in place for that child that may be struggling with that particular.
Teacher feedback.
Oh, yeah, of course, teacher feedback. Sure.
And Karen, I think a piece also that we maybe missed a little bit is that all these things that are happening are communicated home, right? So that there's a parent, there's a open line of communication about these are the things that have happened with your child today at school, and we're looking for that partnership to make sure that we're all on the same page, because sometimes we're not, right? And that's important that we're messaging out like what's going on during the school day, how is your student looking at school, and our responsibility of communicating at home to the parents saying, well, listen, we're gonna be honest with you, these are things that we're working on with your student because they're not working right now, and that's why we're reaching out. So it takes a village, it takes a partnership, and when it works, it's great, but it does take buy-in, right?
Thank you.
Of course.
And Jane. Yeah, so I had a quick question. When did you do the survey that?
This is the end of the school year, last year's survey
End of
data.
2024, so you'll do another one this year, okay. Will we see that before, like, will that be available to us?
I'm gonna turn to Chris.
Did you get it last year?
I think that was a good presentation.
It typically doesn't change much, but you like how.
Presentation was the-
Yeah, I'm just
I
curious.
mean, actually getting the survey before we send it out.
No, like the date, like, just to see, okay, the 2024 versus the 2025.
Oh.
I mean,
I think we're administering late May.
Yeah, we typically do with the
you can see
presentation
like the
once a
class of
year.
2020, whatever they are now. At, at the end of that year versus where they are this year. Because that in itself shows improvement, that seems to be a little more apples to apples.
Yes, that would be more
alignment
apples to apples.
and,
Yeah, I mean, again, like anything else, this is an opportunity to look at, this is how we traditionally do it. Is there a different way? Can we enhance that if need be? So that's something that we can talk about, like, what that would look like.
or we look at it in September when we, come back, how did that
How
change?
did you do? Yeah. That's,
Because I think looking at both, and if you do it by class of 26, or whatever they are, whatever the seventh graders are now, keep them as class of whatever, it's just easier to read. One time.
the other caution, as we discussed earlier this evening, that might be changing, not here, in the policy meeting. There are some changes to who's gonna be getting this information with the new policy, with the retraction of the bullying policies. That's my hesitation, because state has dictated some changes in legislation for it. Which you're all getting retrained on, so congratulations.
But I'm hearing like the timing and maybe the consideration of how we're tracking data year over year, right? Because if we're administering it like now-ish, then we're waiting almost like a full year before we report out on data.
Well, I was gonna say, terrific presentation. I really appreciated what you had said, Krista, about the students that perhaps might engage in a problem, but then kind of looking at it and making the transformation, personally and emotionally to be able to not solve it, but help to direct to the right sources. I don't know if this is applicable, but I wanted to ask our students if that's okay, how they feel the climate survey here in the high school. Any thoughts about climate? What do you think of high school?
It's definitely improved from the middle school on. I feel like as you grow more throughout the years, you begin to mature more and you start to understand just like your peers in general and like sort of the world and how you really should interact with other people, having mutual respect. There's a lot of that you pointed out earlier, a lot of mutual respect with the teachers and with the students, which I admire, which I really like that.
Yeah, I really just, compliments to you guys. I think everything that you've done is really great. I've heard a lot about that, 8th grade leadership group. Because our 8th grade year was when we were, still kind of coming out of COVID, so behaviorally, yeah, everyone remembers that year. No one was tough. Yeah. So I know with, talking to Mr. Carroll and everything, that group is kind of a byproduct of like learning how to deal with that moving forward. And just from students too, I've heard just how impactful that has been. So I just think that's great. And I think that you guys for the high school identified a really great issue. I feel like that kind of is an issue that typically gets pretty overlooked. And I just think it's great. And it does seem like the climates have certainly gotten a lot better. So I just commend all the work that you guys have done. Thanks.
So I'm gonna say that the advisory program, which has started here many years ago, I think it's a fabulous opportunity to engage different students with one another and just open up the topic, because that's where it's going. You might find your leaders through there. Because there's one thing about staff being engaged with and having the students be able to have that reciprocity, which is really important. And many years ago, they didn't really have that, but now it's really student choice and voice. So it's great.
Well, thank you for your presentation. It's really interesting coming out of COVID and what you've all had to experience as teachers, as students, as parents, and the numbers look good. I mean, they speak for themselves in terms of improvement in behaviors. You're using evidence-based practices. When you do them right, the outcomes are going to be positive. You're according to the model, the fidelity of the model, all the things you said about PBIS or restorative practices, restorative classrooms. So retraining and retraining and more education for the students, for the staff is really important, and you're doing that. So I just want to commend you for that. One thing that's, Jack, you brought it up about youth and family. and how they have a survey, and, you know, it's not an apples to apples comparison, but will it be a dialogue with youth and family about the results of your survey? Is there gonna be an opportunity for that?
We actually, I would say definitely at the middle school, probably because of proximity as well. We work really closely with the youth and family. They were part of our wellness day, so we had our wellness day on the fourth. I know that some of the high schoolers came down and spoke about some different things, but a lot of that had to do with not just physical health, but mental health and those social skills as well. And we were able to utilize some of our great high school students to be parts of that, but there were many focuses of that. And youth and family actually helped organize that entire day. They ran sessions. They run lunch bunches with us. They do some of the counseling with us. When we have something that comes up that we are concerned about, this is not a current concern, but in the past, we've had issues with, say, vaping with some of our older students in the upper grades of the middle school. And we've partnered with them to be able to teach our students about being safe with those things and not using those things. Actually, again, by using some of the, having some of the high school students come down through the youth and family groups to be able to talk with our students. So we actually work very closely with them on a regular basis.
Same thing at the high school, our student intervention team, which is constantly has their pulse on the, or is looking at the pulse of the school in terms of behavior and attendance and grades. When we identify that there's a group that could use some help, we partner with youth and family, and they come in and they run different groups. So some, maybe as frequently as 3 times a week, they're in our building, doing different activities for different groups of kids and partnering with our school psychologists and our social workers to identify very specific things that are going on with each group that they can help out with.
Matt wanted to add.
No, they actually just came to a professional development, and presented the findings of their survey, so it was nice for our staff to have an opportunity to, like you said, dialogue and kind of get the vibe from what the town's experiencing on a larger scale, and I think for the most part, we were surprised by the data in the sense that I think with all the different things that are happening, with law changes and things that become legal or illegal or whatever, that our numbers looked very good. So it was a good dialogue and opportunity for our staff to just learn more about the entire community.
Thank you. So one thing that Dr. Bachman, you used the word alignment. There's clear alignment between the 3 schools. What's going on, what's discussed, behaviors that kids are having, and the information that's shared. There's clearly a theme that goes through, and that Goodwin, that our kids at Goodwin are being taught these skills at a very early age is wonderful. It only complements and exponentially gets better as kids, you know, mature, as you said. And I just, one last thing, just the feedback, not just data, but, you know, the focus groups you've had with the kids, the students' feedback, you know, through the survey. And then the one thing that struck me was, I think, Jack, you mentioned that though the relationship between the students and the teachers, and that's really being worked on. I mean, that's wonderful. That tells students that, you know, you're in it for, you know, for a lot of good reasons, and you're teaching them good skills that, and they're learning good skills. So thank you for your presentation and for your work.
Really important topic. I guess my question is, we perform the survey around May time, et cetera, then we take some time to analyze each school sets a goal. How do we weigh in on that goal, if at all? Like, do we get any like student feedback on the goal as age appropriate, right? Like maybe not a good win. How do we communicate so that we're saying, like, I mean, I guess for the student reps, were you aware of like what the high school goal was coming off the survey? So how do we, because it's the feedback loop, right? Like the feedback that we're getting into the kind of survey, I guess, how do we get that back to the stakeholders, or is there anything that we should be doing differently there?
So we involve a very small portion of students in the development of the goal as part of the Safe School Climate Committee, but there are opportunities I'm already thinking of where we can then take that information and actually have those students kind of out in front delivering that goal and say, this is what we have identified that we're going to work on this year. So, you know, our student groups are super in student government, and then they can also disseminate from there too and really get everybody together working on that goal. So yeah, definitely opportunity there.
And just a quick question, is that you've engaged so many different groups of people, and I'm curious to know if you thought about engaging families, just say for professional development, because what you do at school is so evidence based that parents can learn to maybe transfer some of those skills at home. So like a good one, you know, Jeff, you go to a quiet spot. You know, so it's actually not punitive, but rehabilitative. So those,
Yeah, I would say, and I'm gonna speak again for the middle school at this point, if you look at the students who have the number, like repeated behavior referrals, most of the time, when we have a referral to the office and Mr. Walton or I deal with it, for most students, that's it, it's done, we don't have that student coming back. It's a very, very small handful of students where it's a repeat issue. Those are typically the students through our student intervention teams, which we call consult at the middle school, are the students that are coming up, that we're putting plans in place. And when we're putting plans in place, we're having conversations with parents about that as well. This is what we're doing. They help us in a lot of cases come up with the plans. We may have them in the building and have a team meeting with them to make sure that, one, we understand where the behaviors are coming from, because there might be something that we're unaware of that's happening in this child's life that the parents may be able to share with us. And it's not really about the fact that children are not mean. They might have some mean behavior sometimes, but it's typically because they're responding to something else in their life. And sometimes the families can help us with that. Sometimes they need additional supports, and that may come from our counselors trying to give them some advice if they have questions or so forth. And sometimes we involve outside agencies in supporting them as well.
right, my question was not necessarily to pinpoint, but it's just to educate families in general. This is what we do for all our students.
Yeah,
And
that's
it's something
something
that
we figure that out on a regular basis. Actually, Matt, do you want to talk about your parent walkthroughs that I'm like, just, I love this.
Yeah, so this is relatively new and we just started last month and kicked an email out and said, we're gonna kind of go live and we want, I've been thinking post-COVID, we haven't had a lot of families just be in the building to kind of see what goes on, right? Where it's like these walls and like, what's this magic that happens behind there? So I was feeling kind of guilty about that. And I said to Dr. Blockman, we're gonna start these walkthroughs. We're gonna get people in during the school day to see kids, to see like what's actually happening, be fully transparent and just walk people around. Talk about education, talk about like what's current, why does our school look the way it does? How do we interact with each other? And the feedback was unbelievably like positive and thankful, and like this was the greatest opportunity. I can't believe that we were able to be in a school and see the kids and they're walking through the halls and they're so polite. And so we're doing it every month, and we can only do it with a small group of people. We do about 5 or 6 families at a time, just because we take up space as we walk through the halls and we're engaging and interacting with teachers and kids. But it's a step in the right direction, and it's really, really positive for parents to be able to say, you know what, they go out and they tell their friends that this is what happens in Old Salem Public Schools, and they're proud of that, and so far so good.
And I think it helps build those relationships with the family, so when we do have to have a harder conversation, we're in a place of trust with them.
So much.
All right, thank you all very, very much. All right, next we'll move on to our series 5 and graduation policy.
Okay, so there is I'm gonna try to make this as brief as possible. Our current graduation policy, which is the board's designation for what our kids have to accomplish in order to graduate from high school. Back in 2023, the state legislature allowed the personal finance class is a state graduation requirement. It's also our graduation requirement. I'm gonna call on you, Karina, you don't know this. In 2023, prior to 2023, that credit was listed as a STEM elective, not, that's where the board had delegated that, that's how it was directed to do that. 2023, the state gave boards of education permission to either have that as a STEM elective or a humanities elective. What ended up happening during that time, you had a virtual meeting when you adopted that policy. I have witnessed the virtual meeting, I have looked at them, because I wanted to see the intent first. For no other reason than a clerical error, that was moved from a STEM elective to the humanities elective. Where that becomes problematic is that the amount of electives for humanities has decreased from 1.0 to 0.5. And the amount of STEM electives have increased from 1.0 to 1.5. That was not the board's intent at the time of the passing. Unfortunately, we made an addendum to this policy this past February based on what was already in existence. So I didn't pick up on it then because I looked at the existing policy. That was when we brought it in February for the board, that's when capstone became optional, and because the board opted to keep capstone as part of the requirements, we didn't have to make any substantive changes to the policy. So my request to the evening is the board is to just rectify what the board's original intention was back in 2024 to keep personal finance as a STEM elective, which in essence you have to move back. While we're doing it, there is one other change on this policy that I'm going to recommend that we do is in the board's graduation policy, you have a 0.5 currently as an internship. We don't call that an internship in the program of studies, that's a CCR credit. So I would just like to, since we're in here cleaning it up, I'm just asking that because it's a change of an existing policy, we have to go through the normal policy revision process, not through committee, but through the board. So this would be a first read of the change. It'll be on your agenda for next week. Once it's finalized, we just want to make sure we're clearing everything up, particularly for our guidance counselors at the high school who are matching. The program of studies is aligned with the board's intention. It's just, it was a virtual meeting and something got lost in translation. You guys were all in your living room. That clear?
Yeah.
We're trying to go fast.
It's very fair.
Okay. You have to take a vote. Yes,
To
you have a motion.
adopt this,
Yeah, that's
policy
fine.
as revised, so.
I move.
Moved by Jane, seconded by Karen, any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, motion carries. Right, so then we'll move on to our residency request.
Yes, back for 8, if you guys want to know, you have to speak.
Thanks.
For a couple days.
Oh, yeah. Lex, I'm gonna call your mother.
Thank you.
Are you waiting?
Have a good night.
You guys have a good night.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, I can't leave.
You're nice. Good night,
The
guys.
keys are in my truck, just go and take it. You're getting your license soon enough.
You know you're being taped, right? It's a public meeting. Okay, next, permission to attend Old Saybrook Middle School per your board policy. We have a student who's moving out of district but is requested to complete the remainder of this academic year at the middle school. The board has adopted that in the past. I would recommend that you do be able to take that action.
And I'd like to make a motion to approve the residency for West as presented.
On, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries. Thank you so much. Okay, then we have our health food certification.
Okay, this I know of because this is my first meeting. I came in person last year before I started work here. You do this every year. You have to verify the healthy food certification. This conversation a year ago was the advent of the meatless Monday discussion. That's why I'm familiar with it.
Yeah.
But every year the board has to do the healthy food certification, which is in your packet, in order for us to be in compliance. It also has to have an exception statement, so that we could sell non-conforming foods for student events. So that would require board action to do.
Need a motion.
And do we need the exact verbiage to be read to the, or is it enough that it's in the minutes?
I think it's enough that it's in the minutes that you can make the motion to participate. And I do not believe it needs. Excuse me, you might want to do the participation as a motion and the exception as a motion for this, and then there'll be the beverage statement separately. So in total, it'll be 3 motions, I think, just to cover yourself.
So the board so chooses, we need a motion.
Yes, so I'll make a motion, to participate in the healthy food, certification participation statement as presented.
Yes. Seconded by Jane.
Okay.
Any further discussion on this? Brandon?
Yeah, I brought this up last year and it's just really for a point of discussion. We get 10 cents from what I'm understanding in this memo, we get 10 cents reimbursement per meal. So over the course of a year, we'll get $6,000. And I appreciate that over 15 years, we've gotten over $100,000. But for me, it's a cost benefit analysis. Does not participating offer us a little bit more flexibility and options for creating more appealing and flexible purchasing on the part of the student? versus locking ourselves into, like, what do we gain? We gain 10 cents a meal. I don't see what this healthy foods certification does for us versus not having it.
I think as we mentioned last year, the healthy foods is specific only to snacks in the vending machines. So, if you weren't.
So this isn't meals that they're buying.
Right, if you weren't to participate in this, there is still no more flexibility in the meals that we serve. Because that is designated by the National School Lunch Program.
That's a separate thing.
Right,
This is
which is
just
the only
for-
thing that allows us to give free or reduced opportunities for students.
Right.
So this is just saying the snacks and extras that we have in our vending machines or the à la carte sales outside of the meals have to fit these specific parameters. And then the only way they can base that reimbursement is per meal. They don't do it based on the items that are sold. So it gives us.
So that's interesting. So the correlation is, hey, you sell 25 lunches. It doesn't matter that you sold 100, popcorn things through the vending machine. We're gonna reimburse you based on the number of lunches sold.
Right, because it's the only thing that we really quantify. But based on the promise that we're not gonna give children access to unhealthy snacks, they're willing to give us that additional funding.
Okay.
So that's what this statement says. That's what the participation statement says. The exception statement says, in lieu of this, we do accept and we're willing to say, we're gonna follow this except for at the school play, a specific event, we're gonna sell.
You have flexibility to.
Right,
to
less
sell
healthy,
other- Right,
less
to sell
healthy
things that
things.
people will.
Right, so that's what those two statements really are about. We don't have an opportunity to change what's allowable in the actual meals.
Feel better. Thank you for explaining that. I know you did that again last year because.
That's
just-
it's
just
a difficult
confusing the way
concept,
it's-
yeah.
It's written, Jim.
Yeah, I guess I understood what you said in response to Karina's question. I just want to make sure that we're talking not about the school meals, but snacks besides, because I think in the past, the conception has been that we were talking about school lunches and, you gotta have a rubber chicken in each school lunch and you can't have any Snickers bars, anything like that. But if we're talking about something separate from the actual school lunches that we're serving in the cafeteria, then that's a different
Right, it's
matter
that-
altogether.
That is correct. It is specifically the à la carte separate purchases, which could be either through the cafeteria register at the end of the meal or through vending machines. That's all we're saying is those items are gonna fit certain nutritional values. And then we can get 10 cents per meal that we serve extra. It does not change the type of menu that we're allowed for actual meals.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions?
Right, that's different. People ever complain, I mean, for the vending machines, they want other things in there. They're not out there, it's kind of like, they acknowledge what's there and the.
I don't know that they.
No one yet.
No one yet, but no, they've been purchasing, so they seem to find something.
Yeah. Jim.
Strangely enough, this is probably more directed toward Dave, but are there any restrictions at the high school that say you can't bring in a Snickers bar or Twizzlers in your backpack and eat it during your free period?
No.
Okay.
This is separate than birthdays, it's things like that, this is totally.
This is
all
items that we
sell.
sell.
This is all.
I
understand.
Oh,
I just
so-
know
But
what
we're not tracking, we're not tracking the sales. We just automatically get 10 cents back from the meals that we sell.
Right.
Yes. There's no correlation. They don't do any analysis. It's like, hey, you sell 100 meals, you get 10 cents per meal.
Right, because we could sell a bag of chips for $1, or we could sell, a brownie for $2, like it met the nutritional standards. And we can have $1 sales, we don't have quantities,
Right.
and it would be too complicated.
Yeah, right.
So
Yeah.
for that.
Okay.
There's that compromise.
So we have a motion on the floor, so we'll call the question. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you so much. Another motion, next motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the exception statement under the healthy food certification as presented.
Okay, motion by Karen, seconded by Jane. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, that motion carries. And then we need to talk about that for just now.
So, this is an exception statement. So similar to the exception that you just approved, this is for beverages. That was for food. This is for beverages. So if a soda were to be sold at a basketball game, you're allowing that to happen for fundraising purposes, for events.
We can't sell soda, we could let them sell it after.
Yeah.
That's the exception.
Right. It has to be a specific event. It can't just be every day after school. It has to be the show, a game. It gets very specific times of days and everything.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll need a motion to allow the exception. Okay, moved by Jane, seconded by Karen. Any further discussion? No. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you, motion carries. All right, then we move on to 2025-2026 lunch pricing.
So we're recommending that our sales have increased from $75,000 to $100,000 from last school year to this school year. So the recommendation is that we keep actual lunch prices for next year flat to what they currently are.
I make a motion to keep the prices the same.
Seconded by Karen. Any further discussion on this one? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Carries as well. And then the 2024-25 pesticide application notice.
By law, we have to notify when we put pesticides on any of our properties. So that is in your packet. And there's also attached, notice of pesticide application, it's which one, that has Pam's name on it, not mine. You can see the times and the pesticides that were applied at both the high school and.
Any questions on the sign out?
And teachers get information on that.
So, yeah, we post everything.
Yeah, but nobody's on the property, they'll walk it in with them.
All right, then we have our reminders on the agenda, and then we'll just need a motion to adjourn. This by Eileen. So, thank you. Seconded by Karen, all in favor? All right, thank you all, have a good night.